The text notification arrived while I was in the middle of a business call. Congratulations. You've been enrolled in our How to Be a Man intensive workshop. Your first session starts this Thursday at 7 p.m. Location, Downtown Community Center, room 305. I stared at my phone in disbelief, thinking it was a scam message. I had never signed up for anything remotely like this. After finishing my call, I scrolled through the rest of the message, discovering that someone had paid $450 for this 12-week program designed to help modern males rediscover their masculine essence. The course promised to transform weak, indecisive men into confident leaders of their households. Each word felt like a personal attack. Who would sign me up for something so insulting? The answer walked through the front door 20 minutes later, carrying shopping bags and wearing that smug smile I'd grown to recognize over our 8 years of marriage. She didn't even try to hide it when I confronted her. Surprise. Consider it an early anniversary gift, she said, casually hanging up her coat as if she hadn't just publicly humiliated me. Honestly, you should be thanking me. You've been so passive lately, always deferring to what I want, never making decisions. It's exhausting having to be the man in this relationship. The words hit like a sledgehammer. For years, I'd worked 60-hour weeks to support us while she bounced between part-time jobs that never seemed to last more than a few months. I'd compromised on everything from where we lived to what car we drove, always prioritizing her preferences to keep the peace. Now she was suggesting I wasn't man enough? You can't be serious, I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside. You can't just sign someone up for something like this without their consent. She rolled her eyes dramatically. This is exactly why you need it. A real man would either laugh it off or appreciate the gesture. Instead, you're getting all sensitive about it. She pulled out her phone and showed me the course website, scrolling through testimonials from transformed men and their grateful wives. The instructor is amazing. Ex-military, total alpha. He's helped hundreds of men stop being such pushovers. She looked me up and down with a critical eye. Maybe he can help you find some backbone and start acting like the man I thought I married. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while she slept soundly beside me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't a one-time insult, but the culmination of years of subtle degradation. The backhanded compliments about how I dressed, the jokes to her friends about having to train me, the constant comparisons to her father who apparently embodied some perfect masculine ideal. By morning, something had hardened inside me. I decided to attend this ridiculous workshop, but not for the reasons she thought. I needed to understand why I had allowed myself to be diminished for so long. The workshop started in 2 days. That gave me time to process what had happened and plan my next move. When Thursday arrived, I told her I was working late, not wanting to give her the satisfaction of knowing I was actually going. She seemed disappointed, clearly having looked forward to sending me off like a child to his first day of school. That small act of withholding information felt like the first independent decision I'd made in years. As I drove to the community center, a plan began forming in my mind. She wanted me to be a man. Fine, but she might not like the version of me that emerged from this experience. After all, real men don't let themselves be disrespected, not even by their wives. And real men sometimes need to teach hard lessons to those who underestimate them. I parked my car and stared at the building where apparently I would learn to become a man. The irony wasn't lost on me. I might actually need this course, but for entirely different reasons than my wife imagined. I was done being the punchline of her jokes, the project she was constantly trying to fix. If she wanted a man who took charge, she was about to get exactly that. The community center was surprisingly upscale for a place teaching men how to reclaim their masculinity. I expected something grittier, maybe a gym basement with punching bags and motivational posters featuring wolves. Instead, I found myself in a modern conference room with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. About 15 other men were already seated when I walked in. They ranged from young professionals in their 20s to gray-haired men in their 50s. Some looked uncomfortable, shoulders hunched and eyes down, while others projected forced confidence, legs spread wide as they leaned back in their chairs. I recognized that defensive posturing. I'd seen it in the mirror enough times. "Welcome to week 1 of How to Be a Man," announced a voice behind me. I turned to see our instructor, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate each of us in seconds. "My name is Reeves. I'm not a therapist or a life coach. I'm just a guy who spent 20 years learning what works and what doesn't when it comes to being respected in this world. Reeves didn't waste time with icebreakers or feel-good platitudes. Instead, he began with a blunt question. How many of you are here because someone else thinks you need fixing? Nearly every hand went up, including my own. That's usually how it starts, Reeves nodded. Wife, girlfriend, mother. Someone decided you weren't measuring up to their standard of manhood. Here's your first lesson. Their opinion is irrelevant. True masculinity isn't performing for someone else's approval. As Reeves continued, I found myself taking mental notes, not of his advice about posture or vocal tonality, but of his underlying message about boundaries and self-respect. When he asked what had brought each of us there, I briefly shared my situation, carefully edited to sound less pathetic than it actually was. She signed me up without asking. Said I needed to be less passive, I explained, attempting to sound amused rather than wounded. Reeves studied me for a moment. And what did you do when she told you that? I came here, I replied. Exactly, he said, not unkindly. You followed orders. First thing we need to work on. After class, one of the other attendees approached me in the parking lot. A software developer whose fiancée had threatened to postpone their wedding unless he manned up. We exchanged numbers, and for the first time in years, I felt a connection with someone who understood my situation without judgment. Driving home, I realized I'd stayed out 2 hours longer than I'd planned. In the past, I would have texted apologetic updates, maybe even brought home takeout as a peace offering for disrupting her evening. Tonight, I simply drove, letting my phone buzz unanswered on the passenger seat. When I finally walked through the door, she was waiting with arms crossed and eyebrows raised. Where have you been? I've been calling for hours. Out, I replied, hanging up my jacket. Her expression shifted from irritation to curiosity. Out where? With who? Just handling some things, I said, walking past her toward the kitchen. I could feel her following, off balance from my unexpected response. You weren't at the workshop, were you? She asked, sounding both suspicious and oddly hopeful. I opened the refrigerator, took out a beer, and turned to face her. Would it matter if I was? Something in my tone must have registered because she took a half step back. I thought you were against the whole idea. I'm full of surprises, I said, maintaining eye contact until she looked away first. Later that night, as she slept, I opened my laptop and began researching our finances. For years, I'd handled the big picture while she managed the day-to-day expenses. Now I wondered what else I'd been missing by being so passive. Our joint accounts showed unusual spending patterns. Large withdrawals to accounts I didn't recognize, recurring transfers to a credit card I didn't know existed. By the time I closed my laptop, the first rays of dawn were breaking through the window, and a cold certainty had settled in my chest. This wasn't just about her mocking my masculinity. This was about power, who had it, who wanted it, and who had been surrendering it for far too long. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I had research to do, appointments to make, and a plan to formulate. The How to Be a Man workshop had indeed lit a fire in me, just not the one my wife had intended. The more I dug into our finances, the worse it got. What started as suspicious transactions had evolved into a full-blown financial betrayal. Over the past 3 years, she had siphoned nearly $42,000 from our joint accounts. Money I had earned working overtime and weekends while she complained about my dedication to my career. The same dedication that paid for her shopping sprees and weekend getaways with friends. I discovered a separate bank account in her name with a balance that almost matched our dwindling savings. Credit card statements revealed purchases from luxury brands and weekend trips I knew nothing about. The final insult was finding receipts for the How to Be a Man workshop. She'd actually paid for it using my own bonus from last quarter. That Thursday, I returned to the workshop with newfound purpose. Reeves noticed the change immediately. You look different this week, he observed as we settled into our seats. Something happened? Just taking inventory, I replied, earning a knowing nod. The session focused on financial independence and setting boundaries. Reeves emphasized that controlling your money was fundamental to maintaining your autonomy. A man who can't say no to financial demands isn't free, he stated flatly. And a man who doesn't know where his money goes isn't in control. After class, I approached Reeves privately and outlined my situation without emotion or self-pity. He listened intently, then recommended a financial advisor and a lawyer, both specializing in cases like mine. Document everything, he advised. And whatever you do, don't confront her until you've secured your assets. The moment she realizes you've discovered her game, she'll escalate. The next morning, I opened a new bank account at a different institution. I redirected my upcoming paycheck, moved half of our remaining savings, and froze our joint credit cards. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about regaining control over what I had earned. By the third week of the workshop, I had begun implementing subtle changes at home. I stopped asking permission for basic decisions. I declined invitations to events that didn't interest me. I no longer rushed to respond to her texts immediately. Each small act of independence was met with increasing agitation from her side. "What's going on with you lately?" she demanded one evening as I declined her suggestion to visit her parents that weekend. "You're acting strange." "I'm not acting strange," I replied calmly. "I'm just not interested in spending my Saturday listening to your father critique my career choices again." Her eyes widened at my directness. "Is this because of that stupid workshop? Did they brainwash you into being difficult? I thought you wanted me to be more decisive," I countered. "To stop being so passive. Wasn't that the point?" She backpedaled quickly. "Well, yes, but I meant you should take charge in ways that actually matter, like planning date nights or handling the yard work without me having to remind you." I almost laughed at the transparency of it. She didn't want a more assertive husband. She wanted a more obedient one who anticipated her needs while still letting her control everything important. "I'll handle the yard tomorrow," I said, ending the conversation by walking away, another new behavior that clearly unsettled her. Later that week, I met with the lawyer Reeves had recommended. After reviewing my documentation, he confirmed what I already suspected. I had grounds for divorce based on financial infidelity. More importantly, he helped me understand how to protect myself in the process. "She's likely to claim you abandoned the marriage emotionally," he warned. "She'll paint herself as the victim who was forced to take financial matters into her own hands because you checked out. We need to get ahead of that narrative." With his guidance, I set up an appointment with a marriage counselor, making sure to document my attempt to save the relationship. Predictably, my wife refused to attend, sending a scathing text about how counseling was for weak men who can't handle their problems. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, who added it to our growing file. By the 6th week of the workshop, I had secured copies of all important financial records, established my own credit accounts, and consulted with both legal and financial professionals. I had done everything by the book, methodically closing off every avenue she might use to continue exploiting me. All that remained was deciding how and when to deliver the message. The workshop had taught me about timing and leverage, waiting for the right moment when your position is strongest. As I reviewed the course catalog for the upcoming community center classes, an ironic opportunity presented itself: financial independence, surviving after housing loss. The perfect course for someone who might soon find herself without the home she'd taken for granted. I smiled as I filled out the registration form, listing her name as the participant and using my email as the contact. The confirmation arrived immediately. Her class would begin the day after my final How to Be a Man session. Sometimes poetic justice requires careful planning. Timing is everything when executing a plan. The workshop had taught me that power isn't just about strength. It's about patience and preparation. I spent the next 2 weeks meticulously arranging every detail, leaving nothing to chance. First came the financial separation. I met with my company's HR department and changed my direct deposit information. Then I visited 3 different banks in one day, transferring assets and closing joint accounts. By the end of the week, I had secured a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just a temporary base of operations while the inevitable storm played out. At home, I maintained the appearance of normality. I continued doing household chores, nodded along to her critiques, and gave no indication that anything had changed. This performance was surprisingly easy. I'd been playing this role for years. The difference was that now I recognized it as a tactical choice rather than a personality flaw. "You seem different lately," she remarked one evening while scrolling through her phone. "More? I don't know, present. Just trying to be better," I replied noncommittally. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was trying to be better at protecting myself. She seemed pleased by this, interpreting my calm as submission rather than strategy. "The workshop must be working then. Maybe you should thank me." I managed to smile. Maybe I should. While she slept, I photographed documents, copied files, and backed up evidence of her financial misconduct. I created a detailed timeline of her withdrawals alongside her increasingly critical comments about my masculinity. The pattern was clear. The more money she took, the more she belittled me, as if justifying her actions by diminishing my worth. By week 8 of the workshop, my plan was almost complete. I'd retained a divorce attorney, transferred my essential belongings to the new apartment in small, unnoticed batches, and prepared the necessary legal documents. All that remained was the performance, the moment when I would finally show her exactly what kind of man I had become. Remember, Reeves told us during the penultimate session, a true demonstration of strength isn't about outbursts of anger or emotional explosions. It's about calm, controlled action with clear consequences. I had chosen Friday for the confrontation. She always went shopping after work on Fridays, giving me time to make the final preparations. I placed the divorce papers on the kitchen table alongside printouts of her secret bank statements and credit card bills. Beside them, I set the enrollment confirmation for her financial independence, surviving after housing loss, workshop, scheduled to begin the following Monday. When I heard her key in the lock, I was sitting calmly at the table, hands folded, expression neutral. She entered with shopping bags, humming to herself until she saw me. "You scared me," she said, setting down her purchases. "Why are you sitting in the dark? We need to talk," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. Her eyes darted to the papers on the table, confusion crossing her face as she slowly approached. "What's all this?" "Documentation," I said simply. "Please sit down." For once, she complied without argument. As she leafed through the papers, her expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to a carefully manufactured outrage. "You've been spying on me? Going through my personal accounts? That's exactly what a man does when he discovers his wife has been stealing from him for years," I interrupted, my voice steady. "I'm not interested in your explanations or excuses. The facts speak for themselves." She switched tactics immediately, her eyes welling with strategic tears. "I don't understand why you're doing this. If you were unhappy, you should have said something. We could have worked through this together. Like you worked through your concerns about my masculinity?" I asked, pushing the workshop receipt toward her. "By humiliating me and signing me up for classes without my consent?" The tears vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Her face hardened into something more authentic, cold calculation. "So what now? You think you can just divorce me after I've given you 8 years of my life? Good luck with that. I'll take everything you have." I slid the enrollment confirmation for her workshop across the table. "I've already taken care of that myself. You'll need this starting Monday. It should help with the transition to your new financial reality." She glanced at the paper, then back at me with narrowed eyes. "What the hell is this?" "Education," I replied, "on how to survive when you're no longer living off someone else's hard work. Consider it an early divorce gift." The realization dawned slowly across her face as she connected the dots: the divorce papers, the financial evidence, the workshop enrollment. This wasn't a negotiation or an emotional outburst. This was the execution of a carefully constructed plan. "You can't be serious," she whispered, real fear replacing the calculated anger. "Completely serious," I confirmed, standing up. "You have the weekend to pack your essentials. The movers will come for the rest of your belongings next week." As I walked toward the door, car keys in hand, she called after me in a desperate voice I'd never heard before. "Where are you going?" "Where am I supposed to go?" I turned back one last time. "I'm going home, to my new place. As for you, I believe that's what the workshop is designed to help you figure out. How to be homeless." The weekend passed in a blur of blocked calls and ignored text messages. I stayed at my new apartment, enjoying the strange peace that comes with finally taking decisive action after years of hesitation. On Monday morning, I received an email from my lawyer confirming that she had been officially served with the divorce papers. What followed was exactly what Reeves and the other men from the workshop had predicted: the stages of manipulation that controlling partners typically deploy when they lose their advantage. First came the barrage of messages swinging wildly between rage and remorse. Accusations that I was having an affair, claims that she had only been saving money for our future. Tearful apologies followed by vicious threats. I responded to none of them, following my lawyer's advice to maintain complete communication silence except through official channels. This clearly escalated her frustration, as evidenced by the increasingly frantic tone of her messages. On Tuesday afternoon, she showed up at my workplace, creating a scene in the lobby that security had to handle. My boss called me to his office afterward, looking concerned. "Everything okay at home?" he asked carefully. "Your wife seemed distressed." I had prepared for this moment. "We're going through a divorce," I explained calmly. "Unfortunately, It's become contentious due to some financial irregularities I discovered. My lawyer has advised me to maintain professional boundaries during the process. His expression shifted from concern to understanding. Say no more. Let me know if you need to adjust your schedule during this transition. That simple exchange, the respecting of boundaries, the absence of judgment, reinforced that I was on the right path. In the past, I would have been mortified by such a scene, rushing to apologize for her behavior and make excuses. Now I simply acknowledged the situation for what it was. Wednesday brought the inevitable flying monkeys, mutual friends and her family members reaching out to express their concern and urge reconciliation. Each conversation followed the same script. They had spoken with her. She was devastated. Surely this could be worked out without such drastic measures. To each, I responded with the same calm recitation of facts. Yes, we were divorcing. No, it wasn't a rash decision or midlife crisis. Yes, I had documentation of financial misconduct. No, I wasn't interested in counseling at this stage. The consistency of my responses seemed to unnerve them more than anger would have. On Thursday evening, what would have been my final workshop session, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello. It's Reeves," said the familiar voice of the workshop instructor. "Got a minute?" He explained that my wife had shown up at the community center, demanding to speak with him about the brainwashing cult that had destroyed her marriage. When staff refused to let her disrupt the class, she had created enough of a disturbance that security had to escort her out. "Thought you should know," Reeves said. "This kind of escalation is common when someone realizes they've lost control. Be careful, document everything, keep your security tight." I thanked him for the warning, realizing that despite my careful planning, I had underestimated her potential for public disruption. I immediately called my lawyer, who advised filing for a temporary restraining order given her increasingly erratic behavior. Friday marked 1 week since our confrontation. I returned to the house to collect some remaining belongings, bringing a friend from the workshop as a witness. We arrived to find the front door unlocked and the interior in disarray. Clothes strewn about, furniture overturned, framed photos smashed. In the kitchen, a half-empty bottle of wine sat on the counter beside a notepad covered in angry scribbles. Many of the phrases matched the workshop materials verbatim, but twisted into bitter parodies. How to be a real man, betray your wife without warning, and alpha male secret, cowardly abandonment. As we carefully picked through the chaos, documenting the damage with photos for the inevitable insurance claim, her car pulled into the driveway. My friend and I exchanged glances, preparing for the confrontation we had hoped to avoid. She entered the house with a strange calm that was more unsettling than the rage I had expected. Her appearance was disheveled, hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep. "So this is what a real man does," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Sneaks into his own house when he thinks his wife won't be home." "I'm just collecting my things," I replied evenly. "I notified you through my lawyer that I would be here today." She laughed, a hollow sound without humor. "Your lawyer?" "Of course, because real men communicate through lawyers instead of talking face to face." My friend stepped forward slightly, a subtle reminder of his presence as witness. She noticed the movement and turned her attention to him. "Another one of the brainwashed brotherhood? Did they teach you how to abandon your commitments too?" "I think we should go," my friend said quietly to me, recognizing the situation was deteriorating. As we moved toward the door, she blocked our path, her composure cracking. "You can't just walk away from 8 years like it meant nothing. What about everything I sacrificed for you?" The irony of her claiming sacrifice while standing in a house paid for entirely by my labor was not lost on me. But engaging would only extend a conversation that could serve no productive purpose. "Please step aside," I said firmly. "Any further communication needs to go through our lawyers." For a moment, I thought she might refuse, might escalate to physical obstruction or worse. Then, abruptly, her shoulders slumped and she moved out of the way. "You'll regret this," she said softly as we passed. "When you're alone in that sad little apartment, you'll realize what you threw away." I paused at the door, turning back for what I knew would be the last time I would speak to her directly. "I'm not the one who threw anything away. You did that with every dollar you stole and every insult you delivered." As we drove away, my friend glanced at me. "You okay?" I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? I had lost my marriage, my home, my illusions about the person I had trusted most. But I had gained something more valuable, self-respect. Yeah, I replied. For the first time in years, I think I actually am. 6 months have passed since that final confrontation. The divorce was finalized last month with surprisingly little additional drama. My lawyer had prepared so thoroughly that her attempts to claim emotional distress or abandonment gained no traction with the judge. The financial evidence spoke for itself. She was ordered to repay the money she had taken, though I doubt I'll ever see most of it. The house sold quickly in the hot market. The proceeds split according to the prenuptial agreement she had signed but apparently forgotten about. Her portion was significantly reduced by the court-ordered repayment of misappropriated funds. Last I heard, she was living with her parents, telling anyone who would listen that I had suffered some kind of psychiatric break. As for me, I moved from the temporary apartment into a modern condo downtown, smaller than the house, but entirely mine. The shorter commute gives me an extra hour each day, which I've been using to reconnect with old hobbies abandoned during my marriage. Weekends are spent hiking or meeting with the friends I made through the workshop, men who understand the journey I've been on because they've walked similar paths. Reeves called me last month, asking if I would consider speaking at the next session of the workshop. At first, I declined, not wanting to revisit that chapter of my life. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized my story might help others recognize patterns in their own relationships before reaching such a drastic breaking point. Yesterday, I stood before a new group of men, some defiant, some defeated, all searching for something they couldn't quite name. I told them my story without embellishment or self-pity. I explained how my wife's gift of the workshop had indeed transformed me, just not in the way she intended. Instead of becoming more pliable to her manipulation, I had learned to recognize and resist it. The workshop title is misleading, I told them. This isn't about conforming to some artificial standard of masculinity. It's about reclaiming your autonomy and self-respect. Sometimes that means walking away from people who profit from your self-doubt. After the session, a middle-aged man approached me, his expression troubled. My wife signed me up too, he admitted quietly. She says I need to man up and work more hours so she can quit her job. Meanwhile, I found receipts for designer clothes hidden in her car. I recognized his situation immediately, the early warning signs I had missed for years. Document everything, I advised him. And remember that being a man doesn't mean enduring mistreatment silently. Driving home, I reflected on the irony of my situation. The How to Be a Man classes that were meant to make me more compliant had instead given me the framework and support to break free. Meanwhile, my ex-wife, who had so confidently believed she was teaching me a lesson, had instead learned one herself, about consequences and the danger of underestimating someone you've systematically belittled. I never did find out if she attended the How to Be Homeless workshop I enrolled her in. Part of me hopes she did, that she sat in that classroom and recognized her own role in creating her circumstances. More likely, she walked out in indignation, unwilling to acknowledge that her actions had led to such an outcome. The men from my original workshop group still meet monthly for drinks. We've formed an unlikely brotherhood, supporting each other through divorces, custody battles, career changes, and the occasional reconciliation. Some relationships could be saved once boundaries were established. Others, like mine, were revealed as fundamentally toxic once the power dynamics were challenged. Last week, I received a text from one of the men. Remember how our instructor said true strength isn't about dominating others, but about refusing to be dominated? Just used that line in court when my ex demanded alimony after cheating. Judge actually nodded. That's the real lesson I took from this experience. Strength isn't found in controlling others or in submitting to control. It's in knowing your worth and acting accordingly. Sometimes that means walking away from a situation that diminishes you, regardless of how much you've invested in it. As for my ex-wife's workshop on surviving homelessness, it may have seemed like a petty act of revenge at the time. Perhaps it was. But there was also a certain symmetry to it, a necessary rebalancing. She had tried to reshape me according to her distorted idea of manhood. I simply offered her an education in living with the consequences of her choices. Today, my lawyer forwarded me an email from her latest attorney, demanding reconsideration of the financial settlement. I deleted it without response. That chapter of my life is closed. The workshop taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, especially to those who have proven they don't deserve your words. The irony isn't lost on me that in trying to remold me into her idea of a real man, my ex-wife inadvertently helped me become something much more important, myself, uncompromised and unbowed. And in signing her up for those homelessness classes, I wasn't just being vindictive. I was giving her the chance to learn something essential about survival on her own terms. Whether she took that opportunity is her choice, just as reclaiming my life was mine.